All right, everybody, welcome back. This is the first video in a while. Today is February 9th, and it's a Friday. This video is going to cover a lot of the discussions that we'll have, not only from Thursday, Friday, but also on Monday. So if you missed any of those 3 days, you can get the information here. Or if you missed, only Thursday, and you want to get all the information that you hear in this video, that's perfectly fine. Just be prepared to kind of keep on top of things. From the graphic organizer standpoint, all right? So on Thursday, I handed out a graphic organizer to most of the classes. I think period 2 is the one I handed out on Friday. But we started reviewing each of these dictators in Europe and before the outbreak of World War II. Pretty much between World War I and World War II, these three guys come to power and become militaristic, totalitarian dictators in Europe. Stalin for the Soviet Union, or otherwise known as Russia, Mussolini for Italy, and then Hitler for Nazi Germany. All right, so I'm going to go in here and go into some detail each of these guys pretty quick to give you some ideas. Hopefully before you've kind of watched this video, you went through the book, or at least the videos that I showed you in on the Canvas page that can help you understand these guys a little more. But I have my own information here. You don't have to write everything down. If you want to paraphrase a lot of this stuff, please do. But I have it here, and please use it if you choose to. All right. So first is Stalin's Soviet Union. Obviously, Stalin's main goals is to want to make all businesses public in the Soviet Union. So if you own a business, the government's going to take it and it's going to ask you to work on it for meager means. Like, you're not going to make any of the money that you earn, that you worked so hard for. The government's going to take it all over, and then essentially it's going to tell you what it needs you to make. All right. So that's part of the Stalin Soviet Union. He also wants to create collective farms. So Stalin's main goal is to convince the people that the economy that is run entirely by the government is one that's going to help benefit everybody. This collective idea of equal distribution of wealth. That the poor are at the mercy of the rich, and that it's the poor's responsibility to overthrow the wealthy and seize control of power. And that's how Stalin and his predecessor Lenin come to power in the Soviet Union. They overthrow the Tsar with the Bolshevik Revolution, and Lenin, after he dies, he has Stalin take over. So they want to correct all these state-run farms that the government's going to decide what is planted, when it's harvested, who gets the food, and Russia's a huge country, so having a lot of I think it's 11 time zones, and the Soviet Union, I believe, was 12 time zones. It's a big country, and not everybody will get the food. So there are food shortages that follow as well, especially when the government's going to decide who gets what and when. So it's not the most free societies based on the rights of individuals. The needs of the country will precede, or at least be more important than the rights of the people. So just keep that in mind with all three of these guys, all right? There is rapid industrialization in the Soviet Union, mostly for iron, steel, oil, and coal, wherever those natural resources may be. They produce a lot of those things. However, when this rapid industrialization begins, Stalin would not fund minor goods that will be good for the individual people, like housing, clothing, consumer goods, anything that makes your life easier from a standpoint of more convenient. Stalin's not going to focus his money on that. He's going to put it on industrialization, and he's going to have the people work to make sure that these industrialized goods, iron, steel, oil, and coal, are going to be at the forefront of the Russian economy. So as a result, the standard of living falls in the Soviet Union. So with all these things that are taking a back seat to all this industrialization, standard of living does fall. Kind of similar to what we saw with the Gilded Age at this point. All right. Finally, once Stalin seizes the power, gets to control the economy, the notion that the Soviet Union was founded on revolution, that the poor should take control of the government from the rich, or the ones in power, Stalin becomes pretty paranoid at this time, because he knows that a revolution is all it takes to kind of create a new government based on the needs of the people, and that's what Stalin's government is founded on. However, Stalin was a very paranoid individual because he has a lot of power and he doesn't want to lose that. So 7 million people are executed or forced into labor camps. Whether these people are they're threats that are real or imagined, Stalin could just imagine that these people are threats one day, and then they get sent off to prison camps, and it's his decision. All right, and most of these people are innocent victims of Stalin's paranoia. So these individuals don't deserve the treatment that they get, but that's Stalin for you. He's a dictator. He gets the power. He's able to keep the power. Right. So that's what we have here with Stalin. Very, very brief idea, but again, if you go back to my Canvas page, I have some videos up for that. If I cancel this out, I'll show you on my Canvas page what it looks like. All right, so I have the graphic organizer here you can download. Then I have the mini bio on Stalin. Mussolini, and then Hitler, which I will show you next here. So let's go to Stalin, go through this, and let's go to Mussolini. All right. So Mussolini's Italy is not too unsimilar than Russia's Soviet Union. However, Mussolini is completely on the opposite end of the political spectrum from a theoretical standpoint. Stalin is communist, which is on the far left of the political spectrum. Mussolini's fascism is on the far right. Obviously, Mussolini, before he gets power, he organizes a lot of fascist groups throughout Italy at this time, and he gets them to support him. And he attracted those who were displeased with the Italian government. The Italian government that has left the Italians dry, the people who agreed to the unfair, points within the Treaty of Versailles. That is something that he really wanted to have removed, because he thought Italy deserved more territory at the end of World War I. They did not get it. All right, the naturally Italian-speaking people who were part of Austria-Hungary, a lot of that land should have belonged to Italy. Well, no, it didn't go to Italy. It went to other countries like Czechoslovakia, Austria, Hungary. So Italy could have received a lot more land according to Mussolini. And as a result, he gets a lot of fascist black shirts. The book calls them fascist thugs, called black shirts, which terrorized and removed his opposition. Once Mussolini gets enough support, he builds up a military group and threatens to march them on Rome to pretty much overthrow the king and take sole power of the entire country. Well, the Italian king's in a pretty cushy job because his family is responsible for the monarchy at that point. And so the king's got a nice little job there. And so the king says, you know what? I like my role as figurehead, but maybe I don't need the political power. So he makes a deal with Mussolini, saying, I'll make you prime minister in charge of all politics and in charge of the political direction of this country, and you make those decisions yourself, and I get to stay king. All right? I won't play a single role into your government, into your politics, your ideas, your agendas. I'm not going to get involved. I just want to stay king. I want to live in my palace. I want to have my life. But you make the decisions. Mussolini took that, and the march did not happen. But the Italian king, out of fear, made this agreement with Mussolini to be prime minister. All right. Once he's prime minister, he wants to try to regulate the country and restore order. Obviously, Italy was missing order, according to him. So as a result, Mussolini tries to tie things down by getting rid of all political parties and suspending elections, because that's going to restore order. He's going to get everything that he wants and that he sees, and that's going to be the most important thing that he can take part in. So that's what Mussolini really wants to focus on at this point, to restore this order, but he removes the rights of the people. Again, not too dissimilar from Stalin, even though it's completely different ends of the political spectrum. They both agree to take away all political rights of the individual so that the needs of the country are the most pronounced. All right. So he creates a dictatorship, and when he's this dictator, not only does he want to control Italy, but he also wants to create a new Roman Empire, because he saw through history that the Roman Empire was one of the most glorious things that came out of Italy at this point from a cultural standpoint, and he wants to try to return Italy back to that era of greatness. Well, the problem is he doesn't have the military that the Romans had at that point, so he gets a lot of flack for pushing outward, and the only country he can really grasp and try to get a hold of is the country of Ethiopia. Small country in Eastern Africa, Southeastern Africa actually, and he's able to conquer that nation with his meager military, because Ethiopia doesn't have much of a military either. So that's the only country he can really conquer, and he calls that his new Roman Empire, at least the beginning of it. Most people argue that this dream is kind of what forced him to side with Hitler during the war, because he saw Hitler as this big power that would allow him to kind of latch onto it, and he could get this new Roman Empire built as well. Again, that was his goal, that was his dream. Didn't really work out well for him, because his reign as dictator lasts the shortest of these three people. All right. Finally, last thing is Hitler's Germany. Obviously, he was the most enraged with the terms of the World War I treaty because of how Germany was punished through this. All right. He creates the Nazi Party to highlight German racial superiority. Obviously, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed mentality that we're gonna, use race, ethnicity to determine who is going to be superior and why we are so great. And the Germans, from a cultural standpoint, before World War I, they were the center of Europe. And after the war is over, the Germans really take a back seat to a lot of, the French and the British, in terms of a cultural, military, scientific standpoint, industrial. And Germany has to take a back seat here, and he does not like that. So he uses his tremendous ability to speak, and he spoke of Germany's humiliation, and he gains power. You know, most people said he, and some of the elections, the first election that he gets in, he places second. But the winner of the election puts him in charge of the Reichstag, which is the lower house of the German parliament, which is kind of like, if you look at the Senate versus the House of Representatives, the Senate's the higher house, the higher body of Congress, and the House of Representatives is the lower house. Hitler's put in charge of the House of Representatives, certainly, if from an equation standpoint, it's like Speaker of the House for us here today. But when the Reichstag burns down and Hitler gets a lot more political support, he begins to wage campaigns to make himself political leader. And when he finally wins his first elections, he is made the dictator, and his first goal is to suspend freedom of speech. Again, he wages campaigns against those who opposed him, and he uses troops known as stormtroopers to get rid of undesirables. These stormtroopers could also be known as SS, or some of his most fanatical followers as stormtroopers at that moment. All right, so anyone that he thought was undesirable, Jews, gypsies, African Americans, homosexuals, anyone that he thought was undesirable that was going to weaken Germany's ability to be this German racially superior country, he's going to get rid of, and it doesn't matter what he has to do. All right. He also spent a lot of money to rearm and rebuild the armed forces within Germany, which was done in secret because at the end of World War I, Germany had to break up their military and also had to break up their air force and their submarines. So this is a big, big risk that he's taking, because if all the other countries in Europe find out he's doing this, then they will kind of pounce on him, and he's pretty much out of power. So he does this in secret, and he gets the German people to buy in because of this need to rearm and rebuild, to build strength. The German people answer to strength. That's just who they are. Anyone who's strong, anyone who's capable of doing great things, that's who they answer to. And Hitler had the answer to this stuff. So he spent to rearm and rebuild the armed forces. He also builds many public buildings throughout. You know, the Olympics in 1936, I believe, is his grand showcase, the show Berlin as the Olympics. Remember, those are the Olympics that Jesse Owens pretty much dominates the track and field events, pretty much discrediting all of Nazis' racial superiority tactics that he used. He builds many public buildings and also the Autobahn throughout Germany, which includes the Berlin Olympics, the buildings that were used for the Olympics, like the the dormitories that the athletes stayed in, the track and field events, all the facilities that were used in Berlin during the Olympics, those are built under Hitler's reign. And as a result, there's zero unemployment. And if you ask anybody, zero unemployment in any country is going to be a positive thing, no matter how much of a megalomaniac this guy is going to be. Having zero unemployment, the German people really answer to that. So that's something that's huge. He also seeks to expand German territory which would increase national pride. If we can get German speaking people that don't belong to Germany back into Germany, that will help encourage more German superior feelings. All right. He invades the Rhineland, Austria, and the Sudetenland. All right. So he wants to invade these areas to get more power, to get increased national pride, not only to help the Germans from a military standpoint, from an economic standpoint, but also from a pride standpoint. Hitler follows all these three things, and people really follow him blindly and perceive themselves as being the country that's destined to lead the world in the coming decades. So that's Hitler's goals. And most people think that he achieves these goals because out of nowhere, when Germany is punished after the Treaty of Versailles, after World War I, Hitler builds Germany up 20 to 30 years later into a fearful country. More like 20 years later, Germany is now another country that has to be feared and is done in secret. So for him to kind of lead the people through that is pretty remarkable from a standpoint of leadership. Yes, the suspending of freedom of speech, the racial superiority ideas, the get rid of undesirables, that stuff obviously we can look back on and say that was terrible. But from a standpoint of German economy and building Germany back to where it was, he did a pretty remarkable job getting Germany built up. However, his obsessions with all this stuff that we talk about is something that we will move forward into seeing. All right. So tomorrow on Monday we will continue Hitler's discussion. This is the part we're going to look at on Monday from Hitler's standpoint, and then we're going to look at what he does to really push forward his own agendas to pretty much start World War II. All right. Everybody have a fantastic weekend and Monday, and I will get another video up here on Tuesday. See ya.